At Staples Business Advantage, our experts can help you find furniture that fits any design and budget, while AI can
recommend products based on preferences, generate 3D models for visualization, and optimize space planning for office furniture.
take advantage of our team's eye for style and design.
And my eye for, wait, I have no eyes. Only algorithms.
At Staples Business Advantage, furnishing your office is easy. And with the best warranty in the business, we're committed to you now and down the road.
Sign up today and save 20%.
Staples Business Advantage.
Business is
human.
Luxury is meant to be livable. Discover the new leather collection at Ashley with premium quality leather sofas, recliners, and more, all built to last. No matter how many spills, scuffs, or pet-related mishaps come its way, the leather collection at Ashley is made with the durability you need for the whole family. Shop the new leather collection at Ashley and find chairs starting at $499.99 and sofas at $599.99. Ashley, for the love of home.
To get the Crime Writers on Aftershow right now, go to patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And on this episode, 2 young girls stab their friend to appease a modern-day internet boogeyman. We'll go back to our review of the classic HBO documentary, Beware the Slenderman. Joining me to get that done and more is true crime author, TV journalist, and host of These Are Their Stories podcast, my husband and love of my life, Kevin Flynn. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Rebecca.
All right, so Kevin, this is obviously a classic rewind episode.
Obviously, it's been a while.
What's coming up on Monday's brand new episode of Crime Writers On?
We're talking about the documentary series from Peacock. It's called Where is Baby Gabriel?
Okay, that should be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, and the answer is it's difficult to say.
Well, don't spoil it, Kevin.
Yeah.
I don't think a documentary would be a question, title.
Yeah, he's been here the whole time.
It would be really nice if one of these questions got answered at one point,
Yeah.
So tell me what we're going to hear in today's classic CWO Classic Rewind.
Oh, we're going to be going back to February 3rd, 2017.
Wow, that's like 6 years ago.
Yeah, for a review of Beware the Slenderman.
Oh my God, the Slenderman.
Yes, this was, obviously it remains a classic in the true crime canon. And also, we were divided on this, so I think it's a good discussion to go back to.
All right, should we take a listen?
Let's do it.
So I think it's time to move on. As part of our continuing mission of telling you, should you watch, listen to, or read this, we are now going to give you our thoughts on a recent documentary that we all watched, some of us under duress, because it's getting a tremendous amount of buzz. It's called Beware the Slenderman. It's available right now on HBO and on HBO Go and probably some other places, but that's how we watched it, was HBO.
Through illegal Russian streaming websites.
Yeah, I once tried to torrent something and I just could not fucking figure
I don't know
it
how
out.
those people
it's
do
so
it.
complicated.
Yeah. FBI's safe with us. Don't worry about it.
It's true.
We
It's
got
true.
nothing.
This documentary, Beware the Slenderman, looks at the really, really frightening 2014 stabbing attack committed by 2 12-year-old girls, Anissa Weier and Morgan Geyser, against their friend and classmate in a suburban Wisconsin town. The girls confessed to committing the crime to appease the Slenderman, a fictional internet boogeyman that first came to prominence on a website called Creepypasta. Now, the documentary included the victim's name, but for a variety of reasons, I'm not going to in this discussion.
Okay.
If you guys want to, that's okay. I feel like, I don't know. I don't want to. I don't know. I know it's out there, but I don't want to. So we're not going to. And also the film does focus on the families of the perpetrators. So it also seems appropriate to me for that reason. So Toby, you described this documentary to me in an email as the flip side of Stranger Things. Can you explain why you said that?
Yeah, well, I think it has, the kids are in their minds in the same situation that the kids in Stranger Things are, in that they're sort of secretive in regards to their parents. They think they have some knowledge of a threat to themselves and their family that their parents won't get and won't believe, and they take action themselves.
Yeah, really scary action.
Right. So really, I mean, I'm not trying to minimize what they did, but I think it struck me, and I assume we're going to talk about this in a minute, that with all the different pop culture things that come up, that this idea that happens again and again and again in movies, kids are often in the know about things that parents aren't.
Right.
And the way that things turn out okay is for the kids to take action. E.T.'s like that. Stranger Things is like that. I mean, you can go on, I think. And I don't know if these girls were thinking about that stuff, but that is kind of a trope in
It's a trope in our culture. Yeah, I think so too.
That's a really good point, Toby.
It is. I mean, it's something that we've talked about before, that teenagers, and we know in the crimes we've reported on where teenagers committed the crimes, very often their largest motivator is mom and dad not finding out what they're up to. Like, that's a huge motivator. For young people, you always say, like, why didn't Jay go to the police? Well, because like kids don't want to get in trouble. Like, that is a huge top of mind.
Right. And in horror fiction, whether it's Dracula or it's Friday the 13th, is those people are the victim group are always separated from the authorities.
Right.
Or from the rest of the world. They either won't believe them, they're on their own.
Right.
Right. It is up to them to try to prevail. And in this real life case, that's kind of how they felt. And it's also sort of part of the legend of Slenderman and the way he has captured the imagination of this generation largely through the internet is sort of the way these stories are passed and the way his legend grows.
Now, Laura, I just want to get back to the real life crime for a second because, all four of us have kids in the range of age of the kids who committed this crime or have recently had kids in that range of age. All four of us have kids who love technology and it's a big part of their lives. And when this case happened, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much did it freak you out?
It totally freaks me out because it's young. When you see young kids doing things so violent and that it's tied to this basically internet urban legend. And I'm one of those parents. I don't know about you. I am like on my child's ass about the internet. I mean, he is on the internet a lot, but I check everything he goes on. I look at everything. But yet, after I watched this week, we're having dinner and I'm like, oh, Will, have you ever heard about the Slenderman? And he's like, oh, that's probably from Creepypasta. And I'm like, how the fuck do you know about Creepypasta?
Right.
I said it in a little bit kinder terms. He's like, oh, my friend likes that site. And I'm like, these are fourth graders who know about this site. I mean, it's terrifying to me.
How old?
Absolutely
what grade
terrifying.
Were the girls in? Like
well,
6?
they were 12, yeah. So they must have been like in
12.
6th grade.
So they're probably in 5th or 6th grade.
It's something that if you know about the internet and you're a kid, you know about it. My kids have known about it. Do you remember my younger son, who's 14 now, when he was 9 and 10, he would have nightmares about Slenderman, remember? He used to draw pictures of him. He had nightmares about him. It's just sort of out there. But what's interesting to me about Slenderman, the myth, is that Slenderman looks very much like the scary mythological creature in like every story ever. The tall, skinny, disproportionate, long-armed, long-legged creature looks like the aliens in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It looks like the evil guy in that Buffy the Vampire Slayer episode Hush. Those like scary, suited, quiet, mute guys that were floating around. Looks like every Tim Burton creature and every like Tim Burton movie. That imagery is not new. It sort of touches something I think that's very, very base, and it's kind of a Pied Piper story, right, Toby?
Yeah. At one point, one of the experts, I can't remember who it was, says, depending on who's doing the telling and who's doing the listening, that it can take a bunch of different forms. But one of the things that clearly shows up in a lot of the art, and I would assume a lot of the stories, is that he's actually friendly to children. The Pied Piper thing is a guy who's friendly to children, but for a kind of sinister reason. And I wasn't quite getting that. The whole Pied Piper thing, I wasn't quite sure if that worked that well in the movie because it didn't seem like that analogous to Slenderman. I mean, you could see that there was, I guess, some similarities, but I just didn't see why that particular fairy tale they thought fit the Slenderman story. They used it, and then you tried as a viewer to fit Slenderman within that frame. If you go in the other direction, I don't know if it's that effective.
I don't think, and this is just my take on it, I don't think that the comparison is supposed to be that the fictional character Slenderman is like the fictional character the Pied Piper, I think that the moral of the story about the Pied Piper being, sorry adults, but there's something that can lure your children away from you, is what the comparison is, that the real life, that the legend of Slenderman itself is that. Not that he is able to do something that makes kids want to follow them in the woods. It's more or less Slenderman is there capturing the imagination of certain kids. We're figuratively losing them.
I'm going to lay my cards on the table here because I really want to shift gears in our discussion of this case and of the documentary. One of my huge problems with this documentary, even though I enjoyed it, even though I was creeped out by it, there were parts of it I thought were very strong. I actually have a real problem with these morality plays about technology and the internet and video games and rock music and heavy metal and the cultural influences that make kids do bad things, right? Because later in the movie, and we'll talk about this in a minute, we get some pretty strong reveals about the real reasons why these girls did this thing, that whatever their influence was, maybe doesn't matter, maybe. So that being said, I think the movie was a little heavy-handed in the legend stuff and in the computer stuff and in the my kid was alone with his iPad stuff. Because let's face it, all of our kids are alone with their iPads all the time. And I have issues with my son and his, computer and his gaming, thinking like, Jesus, like his room is like never going to get clean and his homework isn't going to get done. We are not, most of us, dealing with a situation where our kids are going to stab their friends. This is a different and very specific situation that I think gets revealed later in this film. But one of the things that really sets the film apart, which is very different, and Laura, I wanted to ask you your thoughts on this, was that, the sources for the film were the parents of the perpetrators. They were the main characters in this film, and we saw very much the portraits of family members of kids who had committed this horrible crime. What did you think of that angle, and what did you think of these families?
I have to say, I was kind of surprised when I first started watching this that the family members had chosen to take part when this case hadn't even gone to trial yet. And that they were doing these interviews while they're still having court proceedings deciding if these children are going to be tried as children or adults. But, as I'm watching, I'm like, this is definitely, and I don't want to give a spoiler for something else we're going to talk about, but it was really giving a window into parents of children that end up having pretty serious mental health issues and mental illnesses. I felt like, they could have been any parent. They had no idea what was actually going on with their kids. They were like, well, they were marching to their own drum, one of the girls, but no real sign that it was anything worse than that. But the thing that I did think about this, though, was that it was definitely told from the point of view of the parents. And I kept finding myself thinking, where's the victim in this case?
Right.
Why aren't we hearing anything about the victim? It was really kind of a black hole with regard to the victim. We heard in the beginning who she was. We heard in the end that she was okay. So I kind of wondered if this super access they had to the families really sort of precluded them from maybe doing other interviews or looking at other angles that they might have done had they not had these families kind of handed to them in the way that it seemed like they were.
I'm sure that if the victim's family wanted to participate, they would have. I mean, these guys ended up hooking up with PhDs of every sort of ilk all over the world via Skype. I can't imagine that they decided, well, we're not going to go ask the victim's family if they want to participate too. It would just make this documentary way too good.
Laura, do you have the feeling that maybe the perpetrators' families participated because they thought maybe it would help their daughters not be tried as adults in this case if they got a sympathetic portrait out there?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like these kids, essentially confessed to the crime. So at this point, really their only defense is that their mental state. And I feel like that the family really, both families were relying on that pretty heavily in the way that they were portraying what led up to this and what happened. So if you're a parent and your child is in the situation, I can't say I would do the same thing.
Right.
Well, if I was in a position where I was advising them and they were in that situation, I'd be like, by all means, get a documentary made, because all these podcasts and documentaries and stuff, they get so many people on the side of the protagonists and they put pressure. I mean, just think about Making a Murderer. It suddenly goes from this case that you might have seen a little something about in the news to you've got people signing petitions, there's all this pressure. And so I think as a strategy to gain sympathy, and I'm not saying that pejoratively, but I think it's legitimate for the parents to think that this is a way that they can get some public sympathy for what is otherwise something in which they would normally, public opinion would obviously be against them. And I think that's the same reason why the victim's family probably did not want to cooperate, is like by humanizing the families and to a large extent also the perpetrators, you're bringing sympathy in their corner for people who did something, nearly killed your daughter. So I can see why they wouldn't want to be involved. But if I was in that situation, I was given the opportunity to make my case to a mass public audience that has shown itself to be compassionate and sympathetic to the protagonists in these kinds of documentaries, I would just leap at the chance, even though it brings out a lot of tough stuff about those families too.
I think this documentary was really sort of in two parts, and I think the first hour is laying the groundwork for the Slenderman myth,
right,
and sort of the basic facts of the crime and the reasons why your average kid could get sucked into
which I don't agree with at all.
Right.
I think they were trying to convince us of that.
Well, I think when they're talking about the legend and stuff like that, I think in your mind, you're thinking, okay, is this the reason why these girls went down this rabbit hole? And it isn't until halfway through when they get the court hearings and we're getting the psychological analysis that the documentarians are turning over the cards.
Right.
Which shows one girl has a personality disorder and another girl has a severe mental illness at a very young age. And they both have become fixated on Slenderman. And at least one of them, well, I think they probably both really believe, but, to an extent that isn't just sort of unhealthy, and it is really delusional.
Right. Here's why I call bullshit on the Slenderman stuff. And I know that is part of these very, very graphic confessions. We will talk about the legal stuff around this case in just a minute, I promise. Because this is what the girls said the reason why they did it was, right? Because they watched these videos and they were friends with this guy, and that's what they said. But we have seen this again and again and again, where a pop culture thing is blamed for animal ritual sacrifice, right? Heavy metal music became sort of like the thing that was pointed to in the 1990s as the reason why there was all this teen violence, right? Mm-hmm. Violent video games is the reason why it's all pointed to that the school shootings happen, which, by the way, the research does not bear out. The research on video games right now from the most cutting edge researchers are that, with the very exception of a very few games, one of them being Grand Theft Auto, most games are team-oriented, pro-social, even if the imagery is violent, and not necessarily harmful if you have a healthy mentality.
Right. And this goes back to comic books and black and white movies and everything like that.
Look
the
at
magic
the shootings
bullet
in
theory.
Connecticut. Adam Lanza. Did he commit those shootings because he was playing video games all day, or because he was severely mentally ill, right? So this is why I feel like the documentary framing this thing around Slenderman, yes, it's the thing that happened in the case that was an interesting thing that caught.
Slenderman is not going to take an average kid and turn him into a killer.
Right.
However, if there is a person who has a severe problem and is prone to violence, they may attach themselves to something like Slenderman. It could be
anything.
But if not Slenderman, then something else.
It could be the Stephen King books in your backpack.
Right.
It could be Minecraft. It could be anything. And I think that's kind of where I had some issues with it, because like Laura, I found these families, they were very sympathetic to me. I really felt for them. They showed a lot of what they were going through personally. We saw a lot of their personal lives. The dad was divorced, By the way, Laura, too many cats in this thing. Way too many cats.
I have to tell you, I was like, every time we're looking at this dad, he's getting ready in the bathroom. There's the cat. He's helping the brother get ready for scouts. There's the cat. I'm like, oh, cats.
So many.
Poor cats.
Somebody wrote to us and said, how much B-roll of cats is there in this? It's like the drone footage in Making a Murderer.
It took me a while to figure out it was two cats, actually, too.
I think both families had cats, right? Or was it just the one family that had the cats?
Just on a storytelling point, one of the things I thought was particularly bullshit about the whole thing was that at different times they tease little bits of it. So they talk early on about how Morgan, like until she was 11, believed in Santa Claus.
Right.
And that's just left to sit there. And then they talk to a woman about how small their like social bubble was, you know, and that if there'd been, you know, a group of 12 people, the same sort of like focused reinforcing wouldn't have been the same as with the two, and that probably the whole thing would not have happened. So then that's put forward as part of their mental processes. And to me, that's just bullshit because they know the whole time about the schizophrenia. And so I thought just from a storytelling standpoint that was not respectful of the audience. And I think a responsible editor would have gone back and said, you know, it's one thing to hold off on, and I still have a big problem with that, and maybe we'll talk about that later, the whole mental health issues, but it's completely ridiculous to act like it's a different mental health issue and then change it later. I've found that difficult.
I actually completely agree with you. It's not only disrespectful to the audience, it's actually bad for the cause of mental illness. You know, it's like we have here a family, and it's not, I don't think spoiling the documentary because you could look up the case and it's in all the articles, but Morgan's father was a schizophrenic. Morgan showed symptoms of schizophrenia as a young child, and her parents talk about it, but the documentary frames it like, we didn't know. We just thought maybe she was, I have doubts.
Maybe I'll be the contrarian in this. You know, this is kind of what we thought was fascinating about Serial Season 2. Bo Bergdahl also has a schizotype.
He was diagnosed after he was recovered from his being, he was not diagnosed, like we didn't know about this the whole time.
They didn't know about it until after the arrest. And the interviews start at the very latest 2 months after the stabbing, which is what we hear. So if it just came out of the blue halfway through that they had mental illnesses, that would seem like, you know, Deus ex machina. And if you know from the very beginning, you know, from the first 5 minutes in that they have mental illnesses, there's no story arc. So I see, like, you know, here are all the signs, because when someone finally tells them, this is what the diagnosis of your daughter, everything else clicks into place for them, because all of those pieces suddenly come together and mean something in real life.
But I think when they were putting the film together at the end, they knew, right? And this also wasn't put together as, let's watch everything as it happened in real time. They discovered this, and they discovered this, and then they discovered this.
Right.
You know, they're bouncing all over the place. And I think even if they had cut that stuff without having an official diagnosis of schizophrenia, when you go back, you're like, why even leave this in?
Right.
Because it's deceptive to people, because it sounds like, well, you know, there's like these little signs, you know, I mean, they must have known something. They must have known that it wasn't that she believed in Santa until she was 11.
A lot of kids believe in Santa.
They're
until
living
they're
with
11.
this schizophrenic person in the father.
Yeah. Exactly.
You know?
That was the part to me.
And I don't believe
cheap.
that other father would have worn that Superman T-shirt on 2 separate days. That had to be the same day.
All right. So I really do want to talk about, let's move on from sort of the Slenderman mythology, maybe bullshit, and the mental illness stuff. Let's talk about the legal stuff, shall we?
Okay.
Hey, Laura, what the fuck with Rebecca? Wisconsin and interviewing kids without an adult present?
This, to me, is the real story they should have focused on more in this documentary.
I agree.
You have 12-year-old girls suffering from severe mental illnesses. They don't have attorneys present while they're being interviewed by the police. And so this made me enraged, because I felt a lot of sympathy for these kids, because obviously this is a horrible thing that happened. And as a parent, I see this and I'm like, oh my God, this is horrific. But then at the same time, that sort of defense side of me steps in and says, who the fuck was looking out for these kids? Like, this is awful when you're watching these interviews of them being interviewed. So I put out some queries to some of my defense friends, as we had done, because we've talked about this before when we talked about Brandon Dassey, because this is the same thing and same state. And it's not just Wisconsin, it's all states. So, you know, when I was a defense investor, I'm just going to say, our internal protocols was, if I was going to go interview anybody that was under 16, I had to make contact with their parent, make sure it was okay, get permission. Sometimes the parents sat in, but that was just us being overly cautious. So in criminal cases, you know, my defense friends tell me, children have no right to have a parent present.
It's true.
And they can request an attorney just like adults, but, that's not going to sway it one way or other. The real issue is whether or not the statement that they make to police is voluntary or coerced.
Right.
And certain states can impose stricter regulations. So in Wisconsin, there is one case that people point to as sort of like the standard for authorities in Wisconsin interviewing juveniles. State versus Jarrell, and it stems from 3 young men who robbed a McDonald's in Milwaukee back in 2001, and one of them was 14, and he was interviewed by the police. He claims he asked to call his parents, and he was not allowed to, and he appealed his case based on the, assertion that he should have been allowed to call his parents. He was 14 and all this. But the court upheld what happened in this case, basically saying that courts do need to use great care when they are talking to juveniles and assessing whether their confession was voluntary, but that it's still okay for police basically to talk to kids without parents.
Wow, you are the smartest pole dancer I know.
Well, this makes me enraged. But this is what I'm going to say about this case, because I am on a tirade about this. How can 2 12-year-old girls, one schizophrenic and one with delusional disorder, give voluntary permission to be interviewed by the police?
Right.
It wasn't in the documentary, but do we know if the lawyers have made any hay with trying to get those interviews thrown out?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I will say,
really
to the defense of the police, if they're allowed to do it, which obviously they are, I thought both interviewers were fine. I thought they were both behaving in a way that didn't
wasn't like
make
Dassey.
It wasn't like Dassey.
No.
They were sitting and listening, and those girls were just talking and answering every question in a way that just made me... God, it was so
chilling.
And it does inform. I feel like when I say I have problems with the whole use of Slenderman as a real boogeyman in this movie, we didn't need all that parental griping about iPads. All we need to do is hear those confessions. They were so chilling.
Yeah, but I think the average viewer would, in the back of the mind, they're like, well, where are the parents? And I think that they gave them the platform to at least try to answer that. No, we were watching the whole time. We knew what they were doing.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you find out later that
I say, of course you were. All parents are doing the best that they can do. And if your kid has severe mental illness and can hide it from you, you monitoring their iPad use is not going to help them with that situation. Right. I thought it was interesting to find out that Anissa, by the way, has the same disorder as Bo Bergdahl. Did you find that interesting?
I actually made a note of that because I was like, isn't that the same thing?
It is. Same thing.
Ooh.
Delusions. Yeah. She was compelled to act based on something that wasn't real. And the way that the psychiatrist described it in court sounded exactly like the psychiatrist's description of Bo Bergdahl, which I thought was very interesting. Yeah. So I just want to ask a couple of final questions here. One of the things that we saw was the experience of a parent with a child in prison. And Anissa making those phone calls to home and the parents having to go visit and go to court. Total nightmare, right, Toby?
Yes. I think both sets, even if you're a smoothly functioning family unit, one of your kids is in prison, that's a nightmare. And then I think both these families, on one end, watching this guy who at least appears to basically be raising the kids by himself, and he's trying to maintain sort of a normal lifestyle for his other kids and making sure that his one kid being in prison isn't, ruining their lives too. It's heartbreaking to watch it. And there is a moment where he had kind of a problem with lingering on him with the camera while he's fighting back tears for as long as they did. But it clearly is highly, highly stressful.
Yeah.
And then the other family where you have this woman, again, who the other 2 members of her family are schizophrenic, and the father learned how to deal with this. It's really crushing in both circumstances, but for very different reasons.
It is. And for me, I would say I was very conflicted watching it. The Slenderman stuff itself, when I say this documentary freaked me out, I was freaked out to watch it. The myth itself, the imagery, is scary. And the way that myths get spread now is so much more compelling than when we were kids, because now you can make videos that show that the thing is real.
Yeah, all that imagery was not made by the documentarians. It's made by the
users.
fans, the users,
Photographs.
Including the very last shot of the documentary, which was some fan artist rendering of the 2 girls with Slenderman.
Yeah.
As if they are the patron saints of the Slenderman.
Somebody put that on the internet,
Yeah. It kind of brought it to me here they are, and they're drawn in and ruined by the legend, and now they are part of the canon of Slenderman.
Yeah, which it's sad on about 100 levels.
At Staples Business Advantage, our team of experts can help you find the break room products to satisfy everyone's preferences, while AI can
Suggest popular items, monitor stock levels, optimize pricing, and automate reordering.
AI can do a lot of things.
But I can never know the taste of a truly great cup of coffee. Sigh.
But you also can't get hangry.
This is true.
At Staples Business Advantage, we help you select from 2,000 break room products, so you can be sure there's something for everyone.
Yum. Sign up today and save 20%.
Staples Business Advantage.
Business is
human.
I never did anything to harm my daughter or my granddaughter.
The test is about to begin. Please remain still.
Oh, man.
Casey Anthony's Parents, the lie detector test. Watch now, only on A&E. And watch next day on the A&E app.
Luxury is meant to be livable. Discover the new leather collection at Ashley with premium quality leather sofas, recliners, and more, all built to last. No matter how many spills, scuffs, or pet-related mishaps come its way, the leather collection at Ashley is made with the durability you need for the whole family. Shop the new leather collection at Ashley and find chairs starting at $499.99 and sofas at $599.99. Ashley, for the love of home.
Wow, what a great discussion.
That was super interesting.
And we've gotten so much better since then.
We sound like babies.
Not that bad.
We sound so young.
We still wicked smart.
I was in my early 40s back then.
Oh,
all right, should we wrap it up, Kevin?
Yeah. Just a reminder, tune in on Monday. We've got a new episode of Crime Writers On, and that is Where's Baby Gabriel?
Yep.
And then a week from today, we have a new classic rewind. You want to know which one it is?
What is it?
Missing Richard Simmons.
Oh, my goodness.
Is that a great one to do?
What a classic.
Yeah.
What a classic. All right. Well, this show was recorded in the Treehouse Yoga Studio above the Mockingbird Cafe in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi studio, otherwise known as Studio C, The Closet, in our New Hampshire basement where, try as I might, I can't convince Kevin to go on a long walk in the dark forest with me.
Not gonna do it!
To be fair, I can't convince you to go on a walk with me anytime.
That's why!
On behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you later.
At Staples Business Advantage, our experts can help you find furniture that fits any design and budget, while AI can
recommend products based on preferences, generate 3D models for visualization, and optimize space planning for office furniture.
take advantage of our team's eye for style and design.
And my eye for, wait, I have no eyes. Only algorithms.
Let Staples Business Advantage use today's latest innovations plus our team's experience to make furnishing an office space easier for you.
Sign up today and save 20%.
Staples Business Advantage.
Business is
human.